There is one thing in this world that I have an unending love for: Transformers. I love this dumb franchise and have loved it for literally my entire life at this point. And the original came out when I was 4 years old, and since then, I have had Hasbro's hooks sinked deep into me, and there has never been a moment where they have even begun to release me from their clutches. And whether it be all the different shows, movies, video games, or the amount of figures I have decided to purchase for myself despite my bank account begging me not to, I don't know what it really is about all the characters or the stories that they're a part of when they're good, or just the sheer amount of action. But I feel like there are so many people that are just kind of Transformers fans for life when they actually get into it. So I just want to talk about my general love of the franchise and some of my favorite parts as of recently. And then near the end, I want to show y'all my collection since I'm actually kind of proud of it. So starting out, I guess the easiest part to begin with would probably be the movies, since most of Gen Z is also a fan because of Michael Bay. But these movies, man, looking back at these films are probably gonna cause a couple of emotions and realizations, like realizing just how much Michael Bay sexualized Megan Fox, and how racist Skids and Mudflaps are in Revenge of the Fallen. But on a more positive note, you can really look at the first three movies as a slice of film history, specifically for the technology used at the time. These movies, even nowadays, are a pure spectacle. Like, if you compared these movies nowadays to even films like Avengers Endgame, it's absolutely stunning just how real the Transformers movies looked comparatively. This also came with the industry at the time, since Hollywood was much more willing to actually allow a movie to have time to cook instead of wanting to rush it out the door as quickly as possible so they could make more money. Even if the writing quality wasn't the greatest for the Bay movies, he basically demanded an audience with what he was putting on the screen. And this was probably the last set of genuine blockbusters we have ever gotten in theaters for the summer season. Marvel has had some contenders, of course, but me personally, I don't remember the last time I was ever checking online constantly for news about a movie instead of just knowing the date it's coming and just seeing the trailers as they release. When I was but a wee Pichu, I would theorize about the movie, watch the trailers endlessly, research the toy lines to see what plot details I might get from the boxes, play with my figures recreating scenes from the trailers. And these movies were events for me, and I would refuse to be anywhere but the best seats whenever a new one would release. And I still have all my figures from when I was a kid, and I remember all of the ways I would play with them and all the storylines I had for them. Also, getting back to the movies, I think a lot of the criticisms people have for the writing are valid in these. But there was always one thing I genuinely have never been able to agree with about these specific films, and that's just that Prime is just a murderous psychopath for absolutely no reason. I always see his progression in brutality as a pretty natural stepping point all throughout the main trilogy and even some parts of Age of Extinction. Let's not forget, Prime was willing to sacrifice himself in the first movie, all so that the Allspark could be destroyed instead of killing Megatron, which is kinda wild since that would simply just solve the issue and destabilize the Decepticon threat as a whole. And even after Megatron dies, he doesn't seem very happy about it, since in the lore they are basically brothers, and Prime has been looking for a peaceful solution the entire time. Revenge of the Fallen, Prime is a bit more understandable since the Decepticons at this point are just hiding across the planet and destroying whatever they can whenever they're found. There's not really a rhyme or reason for it. Like even in the beginning when Ironhide and Prime execute him, I like to imagine they think they found some religious terrorist, since he mentions how the Fallen will rise again. Plus, Prime dies in this movie, and when he's revived, he immediately finds that the planet is about to be destroyed by a maniac with a sun-draining machine. So, let's be honest, the only real solution is to kill the Fallen, and he doesn't even go back to double-tap Megatron. But Dark of the Moon is a completely different ballgame, though. His mentor betrays him, there's an entire invasion going on, humans are going to be enslaved to revive his dead planet. I mean, a whole lot of emotions going on. Am I saying the Bayverse Prime is perfect? Absolutely not, but let's be honest, humans kinda lose it after a couple years at war. Autobots and Decepticons have canonically been at war for literally millions of years, The fact any of them are even speaking coherent sentences is pretty astonishing from a storytelling standpoint. Plus, the Dark of the Moon ending was supposed to be completely different. But after a leak of the novelization came out before the movie did and spoiled that Megatron and Optimus were actually going to end the war and that the Decepticons were going to go back to Cybertron to fix the planet and that he would let Optimus know when the planet was healthy again so he could make his way back home and they would all live in peace. But instead, we got Optimus murdering Megatron in cold blood because Michael Bay couldn't handle the idea of the ending being leaked. How lovely. And I really don't want to get into Age of Extinction or The Last Knight, despite me actually liking Age of Extinction. I actually think the first 3 movies are a great trilogy, and we could have had another good trilogy, but I don't think Bay really knew what he wanted to do. Since he started going with the Quintessons, then he switched to Unicron, then we never got another Bayverse movie. But these movies were what made me a fan, so they all have a special place in my heart. Plus, the PS2 version of the Revenge of the Fallen tie-in game is the only reason I even knew about the original G1 cartoon. The game had these collectibles at each of the levels that would unlock entire episodes of the show, which was absolutely awesome. And the game may not have been the best, but I would literally boot up the disc just to watch the episodes on repeat until I asked my mom to help me find the actual show. And then we would go and find the first 2 seasons on DVD at the local library, which would eventually introduce me to the G1 movie, which is easily one of my favorite pieces of media ever. And I actually had a huge advantage compared to every other kid that watched the G1 movie for the first time. I was already used to Optimus dying. So when it happened in the movie and on the cover of the 25th anniversary copy had him opening the Matrix on the front, I was expecting him to come back. Which he didn't do in the movie, but he did at the end of the 3rd season of G1. And out of everything Transformers I engaged with that wasn't video games of the original show and movies, it was probably just Transformers Animated and Transformers Prime, which were both absolutely peak, but out of the 2, I definitely have the most memories watching Prime on the TV network, The Hub. No, not that one, get your mind out of the gutter. But the way they wrote the show was much better than I think most other shows were being written for kids around then. It felt much more like it was trying to be engaging for both the parents watching with their kids and even longtime fans that might catch an episode from time to time. Plus, it was a lot more in line with the Bay movies, having it so B couldn't talk besides in radio beeps, RC being a motorcycle, and while Bulkhead was pulled from animated because of his popularity, Optimus felt like he was a much more G1 accurate version of the Bayverse Prime. Same looks, but different heart and all that. And Ratchet was an extremely annoyed character, which made for a fun dynamic since he was Optimus's second in command, and all of the Decepticons as well were extremely charismatic. And I loved all of the characters and storylines for the most part, but the only one I didn't really like was the little nanobots that ate metal, and even then, it only lasted for like 20 minutes. One episode that had lasting repercussions was when Bumblebee and Starscream got their transformation cogs stolen, which meant they couldn't do the whole thing that they were made to do. It was a whole arc with this mercenary group making their own Nemesis Prime so that they could actually stand a chance against the Transformers. And just fun little storylines like that. But this show also served as the inspiration for the horrendous storyline in the movies where Unicron was inside of Earth, which I think Prime did it correctly for the most part, having little versions of Unicron fighting the main team, and even the Decepticons had to get in with the Autobots and help. And then when they realized he was inside the planet, they had to go deep into the core and fight him inside and use the Matrix of Leadership to basically put him back to sleep. It was a huge point of lore in the show and immediately expanded my knowledge since at this point I didn't really know a lot about the origins of Megatron and Optimus, as well as the lore behind the Matrix and Cybertron as a whole, which would lead me into finding out about War for Cybertron, which means we can finally talk about the video games. So out of the 2 main High Moon Transformers games, no, we don't talk about Rise of the Darkspark in this house. I actually don't like War for Cybertron that much compared to Fall of Cybertron. I still absolutely love it and think it's a masterpiece, but I have always held Fall of Cybertron in a much higher regard in my heart. Also, I find it kind of hard to talk about these games here because someday I'd love to do a full blown review for each. So I kind of just want to talk about my experiences I've had with the games as a kid compared to the actual quality and everything I love about them. Well, to be honest, I probably am going to go into what I like about them, but if I ever do a full blown review, surely you guys won't mind it. War for Cybertron, though, was my first experience with the big boy games as a kid. I didn't have the internet as a kid, so the only thing I was really able to engage with were single player games, and the campaign for this was something I would frequent every single day at some points. The actual world of Cybertron and being able to switch between the factions helped me learn about so many more characters. Like, even though some of these were actually in the movies at the time, you didn't really learn their names. Like, I didn't know Brawl was the tank in the first Transformers movie until a few years ago. Of course, there were a couple I knew, like Barricade and Soundwave, but characters like Trypticon, Silverwing, Omega Supreme were all fresh faces to me, since watching G1 was kind of intertwined with me playing the game as well. And the absolute scale of this game was massive. Getting to see Iacon and Kaon in detail, as well as all the Cybertronian designs for all the characters, was awesome. The only thing I really got to see when it came to the war on Cybertron was the Dark of the Moon flashback, so getting to see the precursor to everything was mind-blowing to me as an 8-year-old. Then I had to wait for what felt like forever for Fall of Cybertron, seeing all the trailers as well as reading my Game Informer magazine that was centered around Fall of Cybertron over and over again. All of this made my little tweaker mind as hyped as it physically could be, and at this point I had also properly engaged with all the G1 episodes and knew most of the characters by heart. So getting to see characters like Metroplex as well as the Dinobots and Shockwave meant the absolute world to me. Getting to play as Jazz and Cliffjumper for the first time, with Jazz being my favorite Autobot, was awesome. Legendary moments happening on screen at all times, and getting to play as Combiners for the first time, with such a legendary soundtrack, which you're probably hearing in the background of this video. But these also weren't the only games I played as a kid and had a bunch of memories for. I also loved the tie-in games for the 360 for Dark of the Moon and Revenge of the Fallen. And Dark of the Moon was a lot more like the Cybertron games, while Revenge of the Fallen was a lot more sandboxy. You would be put into an area and you had to complete certain objectives to progress the level. But the PS2 version, the one that introduced me to the G1 cartoon, was basically a beat-em-up style game where you had to clear arenas before moving on in the level. It also had a much more different storyline than the movie, and it still had the same story beats that happened, but they were happening in much different ways. Like, Optimus Prime still dies in this version, but you actually play as Megatron beating his ass. And the DS games were a part of my childhood too, but honestly, I never made it past the first few levels whenever I would play them, because I didn't really like playing as my own character. Maybe I'm the minority, but I much prefer causing chaos as named people than choosing one of 3 vehicles and being stuck with that the entire game. And my favorite thing about all the High Moon games is the variety they give you between the levels, starting you out with different alt modes as well as different weapons. In War for Cybertron's case, you'd even get different abilities for each character if they were the same alt mode in the case of characters like Starscream and the other Seekers. In the case of Transformers Devastation, I can't really say anything because I own it, but have never played it to completion. Maybe someday I can do a review on it, but as of right now, I don't know when I'll be able to find the time to play it. The real unfortunate case for all of these games is that people can't really play them anymore since they all got delisted, because multi-billion-dollar corporation Activision, as well as their owners, multi-trillion-dollar corporation Microsoft, can't pay for the fucking licensing rights for Transformers somehow. This is the same shit that got the Deadpool game delisted as well, so now if you want to play these games, you either have to have already owned them, or you have to pay hundreds of dollars for a key on third-party sites. Or, and I would never condone this under any conditions, of course, to sail the 7 seas and plunder the dirty scallywags, which is extremely easy to do and costs literally nothing. But don't do it, guys, I promise. It's not worth it.
But now that I'm done talking about my experience with the video games, I want to talk about the comics before I show you just how much money a man can spend on plastic. And the comics in general have been a pretty wild topic for me to discuss because the extent of my knowledge is the originals back from the 80s and the new Skybound comics that have been coming out since the end of 2023. I actually own quite a bit of the original single issues from the 80s and love them quite a bit. I haven't really read the stuff from Marvel UK, but I know that it's all a different storyline as well as it being pretty good as well. And all of the IDW stuff seems to be pretty damn convoluted and honestly doesn't really interest me all that much, especially since all of the trades are really hard to find and I don't really like using websites to read comics online, since I like collecting the books in person or having the omnibuses so I can read at my own pace whenever I'm in bed or on a trip. But the Skybound books, oh man, I've been so happy that I can experience one of these stories from the very beginning, especially since it kicked off an entire universe within Image as well as Skybound, being
The Energon Universe.
which includes all the G.I. Joe titles as well as Void Rivals, which I read in the beginning, but I kinda lost interest since Transformers was easily the best book coming out in the universe. But the first two major arcs of the Skybound book were easily some of my favorite content, as well as art in the entire franchise as a whole. Daniel Warren Johnson and Mike Spicer brought an entire new vibe as well as iconic feel to the G1 designs with gritty and violent art that really brought the brutality of metal on metal and the mortality of just what would happen when a human gets into a situation with a giant metal beast. And the absolute visceral art of the horrendous deaths in the early books made sure it is very clear that the version of the Transformers in this is not for kids and is very much aimed towards the older adults. Not that kids are collecting comics nowadays anyways. And I also really love all of the different characterizations of the characters in this series. Optimus in this really brings out that classic quote that Peter Cullen was told by his brother before his audition for Optimus Prime in the 80s, which was, "Be strong enough to be gentle." And with all the Autobots being extremely compelling and having their unique personalities expanded on much more than they ever could have from the G1 show, and even the Decepticons all get extremely deep moments and have very meaningful arcs inside of the series, with the hierarchy of Decepticon leadership being one of the most important parts of the story. Plus, with how the story swaps between POVs of characters on Earth as well as on Cybertron, it makes for an extremely unique experience that almost mirrors Transformers Prime. And I don't really want to spoil the books for anyone, since I think people should support third-party comic companies since it pushes the big two to be as good as they can be, especially Marvel, since basically all of their books suck nowadays. But the most recent arc of Transformers has been a real slow burn with great character moments. There's been a little bit of controversy with the status quo, but being honest, nothing ever lasts in comics, and the status quo will never change. And when it does, it'll always revert back within the year. So now that we've actually gone over something recent in the franchise, now I can actually talk about my plastic crack addiction.
So this is where I have all of my collection basically. So I'm just going to go through, kind of explain stories of how I have stuff and where I got it. And then we'll probably get to all of these near the end of it. This one's probably my favorite item in the collection. But starting off here, these are all of my original G1 toys. So a lot of these I got off of eBay, but this one specifically I got from the Walmart. I think it was the redistribution, and that's the same with that one right there. But then a good chunk of these actually came out of a bundle that I had gotten off of an auction on eBay for like $31, where it included this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, and this guy. This guy was also a Walmart redistribution. And then these three were all purchased separately. This guy barely transforms, so that's why he's stuck in car mode, because if you put him in robot mode, he just falls apart. And also he's got yellowing everything. So these three I got from a job that I used to have, where these were in the Takara reissues where they had the booklet boxes, and that's the same with him as well. This guy also came in the same bundle. This is another Walmart reissue, And then that was also another one that I picked up from my old job where he was also in a booklet box. He, this complete Bruticus, he's got all of his accessories and everything, was also from that same job. And I got all 3 of those for a really good price because I was an employee. And also I had a bunch of store credit. This guy was a Grail that I actually got in Japan, complete in the box and everything. And I'm pretty sure it was an anniversary edition for like the 20th anniversary. I'm pretty sure. And when I saw it, I literally gasped. And my girlfriend was with me and she was like, "What is that?" And I was like, "That is an original Megatron. We can't get those back in the States because he turns into a gun." And I was actually scared that TSA was going to take it away because in the box, he's a gun, he's not a robot. But he made it home safe, and he doesn't have any stickers on him because, well, I want to keep everything basically mint. And I also have all the accessories in the box still. This is my movie studio series shelf, which is kind of a mixture of Bayverse and the Bumblebee stuff. But it's mostly the Bumblebee stuff because I like how the G1 designs look. But the Bayverse stuff I have Mohawk right here. And I do want to start an actual Bayverse collection, but I just, it's money. And I've already spent plenty. But, this is the Concept Series Sunstreaker. He is kind of stupid. I only got him specifically because, well, he's Concept Series and I wanted more Autobots from the Bumblebee movie. That's Wheeljack. A lot of these don't really have like a special story about them. They're mostly just, I bought them. Like, I don't really know what to say. Like, some of my favorites being the Concept Series Megatron from the Bumblebee movie, but this guy in particular, he actually is the only figure I have that has a DNA upgrade kit on him. So I think that's pretty cool, but he's stuck in the corner right now because I don't really have anywhere else to put him in the case. And these two, I really need to get Thundercracker because they just kind of look incomplete. Also, I don't really know how I feel about this figure because he doesn't have enough black on him to be like Skywarp. I also don't really like this one. It really just can't stand. Also, she doesn't have 2 swords like she does in the movie. And this guy, he's okay, but I got him way overpriced. Way overpriced. And then this guy is literally just a bigger core class figure. So and don't even get me started on him. Do not even get me started on Scourge. But then we move down to the G1 shelf, which is kind of bare over on this side because, quite frankly, I don't know what else to get. Not to mention, like, I'm not as interested in Decepticons for G1 as I am in the Autobot territory, but this one is probably the only one that really has a story behind it, because I went to a local comic convention and this guy was selling them for a scalper price back when he had originally come out. And I walked up to him and I was like, "So can I just get him for retail?" And he was like, "Yeah, you know what, sure." So instead of having to pay scalper price when the pre-orders were horrendous when that was going on, I got them for pretty cheap, comparatively. But yeah, there's not really a whole lot of stories with these ones over here. That one is pretty cool just because it's the comic one. I really like that deco. And then this is the original Studio Series Starscream, which I want to get rid of because they have a really nice one now that actually looks like the one from the show. And I bought this one right before they announced that they were doing an actual Studio Series mold, and then this guy's just a little fucking idiot. He is here because he has nowhere else to be, and I got him in a bundle. But then there's this. So this was my grail for a long time, and I had not got him during the during the HasLab. So I had to pay quite a bit of money to get this orange ball to me. But honestly, he came in great condition. He wasn't opened. And for the price that I got him at, which still was steep, it was pretty decent. Then I've got the two little War for Cybertron Gamer Edition, Megatron and Optimus down at the bottom here because I thought it fit. But going up here, this is signed by Peter Cullen himself. I actually went to go meet him at a convention, and that was honestly one of the coolest experiences because out of nowhere I decided, hey, if I'm gonna get anything signed by anybody, it would be cool to have something signed by Peter Cullen in the Transformers collection. And then that is Missing Link Optimus right there with Studio Series Devastator 86 in the background. This is the Nemesis Prime deco of the Bumblebee mold Optimus Prime, which I have this like personal issue with getting multiple molds of the same character. So this was my workaround for getting the Bumblebee mold. And then I have the War for Cybertron trilogy Jetfire in the background, and I also have the Void Rivals 3-pack somewhere. And then this is just the HasLab for Omega Prime, or whatever his name is, which low-key I kind of want to sell, but I don't know. I actually really like my collection. So this is it. I'm probably going to add more to it because I'm about to go back to Comic-Con in about a week and a half here from when I'm filming this. So, but yeah, if there's ever a point where I need to do an update video, I guess this is a pretty good capstone.
So that's kind of all I really have to say about Transformers in general, at least my experience with it. And honestly, I just kind of made this video because I really just wanted to talk about something that I really like and some of my smaller opinions on it, as well as being able to show off just how much money I can spend on stupid things like toys. So honestly, I want to know what you guys think about just kind of the franchise or what your favorite parts of Transformers are in the comments down below. And if you'd be so kind, if you could leave a like down below as well as subscribe, that would really help out the channel. This is Glitchy, signing off. I'll catch you guys next time.